My name is Lila Autry. I am 28 years old, and I learned how to keep my hands steady long before I knew why I might need them steady. On the night my family toasted my promotion, my father sold my mother's inn behind my back, and my fiancé popped champagne to celebrate it. I did not throw the glass. I smiled, memorized the room like a map, and started the clock. The inn sits on the edge of a scrubby peninsula where the tide comes in like a heavy sigh. Bracken Point. Man, the harbor lantern, my mother's life work, looks like it was sketched by a child who loved roofs. 3 dormers, a widow's walk, and a porch that groans on humid nights. My mother, Mira, built it the year she found out I existed, and the year my father helped a developer turn a fish cannery into luxury condos. They were not married long. The harbor lantern outlasted everything. When she died 6 years ago, I came home. I was 22 and thought my knife skills could patch grief the way icing smooths a cake. I ran the kitchen. I brined cod. I learned the slow stubbornness of old pipes. I traded 12-hour shifts with a pantry line cook named Tasha who wore a copper ring that turned her skin green. I mapped the sound the old freezer made before it quit, the click-click of its relay, the way it always failed right after a big delivery. I also learned to watch my father's eyes when money was mentioned. He remarried a year after my mother died. Daria showed up with glossy hair and a son, Owen, who collected expensive hobbies like stamps. My father insisted it was sensible, that the house was too big for him alone, and that a partner with business sense is stabilizing. Daria always called the harbor lantern the property, like it was a spreadsheet with windows. I thought I could balance them. When the bank manager called me by my mother's name and handed me the safe deposit key, I slipped it onto the cord with my measuring spoons. I told myself that documents could keep a building whole the way the right temperature keeps a custard from breaking. The night of the toast was late October, the kind of cold that thins the sound of laughter. We just pulled off the Harvest Gala, a fundraiser for the community food pantry. I had been named culinary director by the local paper and a board member of the Farmers Alliance. That was what everyone was ostensibly cheering. We were in the lantern's small ballroom. The string lights I'd hung blinked like tired fireflies. The dining chairs did that little scrape that makes you want to flinch. On the far wall, between my mother's oil of lobsters and a framed postcard from the year the lighthouse went dark, my father clinked his glass. "To Lila," he said, smile wide as a cut, "who has always made this place taste like home." He turned to the second table, where a man in a slate suit stood. I recognized him as a face from a real estate page. Cullen Baird, Redwood Cove Investments. And then, as if we were in a play that had been rehearsed without me, my fiancé fought. Evan rose beside him, holding a chilled bottle of expensive champagne. "Also," my father added, almost casual, "we signed today. The harbor lantern is under contract for redevelopment. It's time to take advantage of the market. We'll all be moving forward in a big way." The clap stuttered. Some people didn't understand. Some did. The staff looked at me. My sous chef, Rosa, set down the tray so slowly I could count the heartbeat between her fingers releasing it and the plate settling. Evan's hand found my shoulder. It was a hand I knew, freckled, careful with knives, surprisingly gentle with old books. We'd met over a broken oven at the lantern when he showed up to calibrate it, numbers under his languages. He put his mouth near my ear and whispered, "It's okay. This is good news. We're liquid for once." My throat tightened, not with tears, with air refusing the shape of a sound. I counted my breaths, the way my mother taught me when the dishwasher flooded. "No one can hear you if you breathe like a hurricane," she would say. "Breathe like tide." I lifted my glass. The room waited to see if I would spill. "To moving forward," I said. The lights made a small, apologetic hum. Here's the promise I made myself while everyone swallowed bubbles and congratulated themselves for my supposed win. I would figure out how they did it. I would learn what papers bore my name. I would find the thing they needed me for and pull it like a thread. I would do it cleanly. I would not become what they thought of me in their private jokes. Emotional. Impractical. A cook who didn't understand leverage. I am practical. I understand heat. The week after the toast, I watched roofs for sale signs bloom around town like mushrooms after rain. Redwood Cove had arrived with glossy renderings, glass railing decks where retirees could drink smoothies and watch our gray water. The harbor lantern was a centerpiece for them, a boutique anchor for a new Bracken. Daria began calling the contractor by his first name. She wore a new coat. Owen ordered custom skis, then left them leaning in the entry as decoration. My father whistled while he shaved, an old war song he didn't even hear anymore. Evan was gentle, always. He offered to help with the paperwork of the transition. He took over meetings I used to run with the suppliers. He made dinner when I got home too late to taste. He said the redevelopment would let us start without ballast. That word hung in the kitchen like a bad smell. Something else smelled off, too. Not just metaphorically. The coffee tasted different in the house for a few mornings. I lifted the bag, checked the roast date. The beans were the same. I still switched cups with Evan on the third morning without announcing it. More to reset my own head than anything. Old habit. When you can't find the variable, swap one thing. By mid-morning, he called from work. Headache, he said. Weird one. Might leave early. I let him. I stood in the pantry and stared at the shelves until salt looked like sugar. I knew it probably wasn't the coffee. I knew I was looking for proof of a thing I couldn't yet name. When you've spent years getting good at consistency, the same cake every time, you can hear the smallest change. I went to the bank. Miss Paula, who had known my mother and who still wore a brooch shaped like a robin, ushered me into a small room with glass walls and a fern that was just barely alive. She handed me the folder with my mother's estate documents. The words co-trustee and contingent beneficiary glowed like fish under ice. I read the clause 3 times. Any sale of the Harbor Lantern property required unanimous consent of all successor trustees after the memorial date, November 12. The day my mother had always used to close for a week to repaint. It was October 28th. The celebratory champagne had been premature. Mr. G. Autry came in yesterday, Paula said, eyes careful. With new papers. My hands went steady. May I see the signatures? She turned the folder to me. I recognized my name. I did not recognize the way the L fell into the I. It was my signature if you traced it with your weaker hand. I felt heat rise, controlled it. Who witnessed this? A notary at Redwood's attorney's office, she said. Throat clearing. Cullen Baird's firm. I closed the folder gently so I wouldn't tear the air. There are stacks we keep for emergencies. Not the cash under the flour bag or the spare gas card in the first aid kit. I mean invisible stacks, favors we can call in. Information we noticed and tucked away, the way a door sticks when it gets damp. At 22, on the day after my mother's funeral, I'd walked to the town clerk and asked a question that made her blink. What documents exist, I said, that I don't know about but would be harmed by not knowing? She laughed. But she told me how to search liens. She wrote out the steps to request meeting minutes. She showed me the old map drawers that smelled like mildew and paper bark. Now, at 28, I opened those drawers again. I requested the audio from the last planning board meeting. I asked for the list of Redwood's community partners. I printed every press release. Because sometimes the truth hides in what people brag about. And I called Leon. Leon had worked in town long enough to own 3 different business cards, without changing jobs. He called himself a systems consultant, which meant, in Bracken, that he could make your network talk to your fridge and also persuade your aunt to update her will. He'd eaten in our kitchen 3 nights a week for 6 years, at the corner bar seat, with a laptop that had more stickers than the lid. I need to know if my signature has been floated through any other documents, I told him. Define floated, he said. His voice always sounded like it was smiling. Used without permission. Repurposed. Xeroxed, scanned, traced, stapled to things I didn't see. He whistled low. Big ask. I'll bake you the lemon tarts I refuse to put on the menu because they make me cry. I said. Sold, he said. Give me 48 hours and a legal reason. I had more than one. I walked across town to see Attorney Paxton, whose office sits above the bookstore and who keeps a candy dish stocked with wrapped caramels you have to make a plan to extract. She read what I brought, wrote a letter that had teeth without gnashing, and told me to be patient. I have never been patient. So I went to see the person who had laughed the least at the gala, a woman in a cobalt blouse, hair in a sleek bun, standing behind Cullen as if she'd been placed there by a stylist. I'd noticed the way she had held her tablet, professional but reluctant. The Redwood assistant. Her name was on the press release in tiny font. Project coordinator, Minji. Han. I found her at the coffee shop the next morning, plugging her phone into the only outlet that works and frowning at her screen as if it owed her an apology. I think you grew up somewhere colder than this, I said, sitting across from her uninvited. It was not strategy so much as a test. Her scarf screamed Chicago, or maybe Seoul in January. She blinked. Excuse me, your scarf, I said. It looks like it knows real winters, not this gray drizzle. I made it through Boston. That one is better. She looked at me like someone who has been surprised into telling the truth. Seoul, she said. Also Minneapolis. And now, this. She gestured to the window where our town's only stoplight blinked between seasons. Have you ever watched a tide table? I asked. No, it's reliable almost to the minute, I said. People think it's random. From land it looks like indecision. From the chart, it's a timetable. She stared at me. Who are you? I'm the person who was supposed to sign off on a sale that Redwood celebrated before it was legal. I said softly. I'm also the person who cooks better than your boss eats. She pressed her lips together like a zipper. Then, to my surprise, she said, I thought the timing was odd. I leaned in. I want to buy the debt. She choked on her coffee. That's not how most people start a conversation. That's how this one goes. I said, Redwood's leverage isn't the contract. It's the note on our roof and boilers. And beds. If I own the note, their timeline changes. Do you have that kind of money? She asked bluntly. I almost smiled. Do you think the only way to own something is to hand a pile of cash across a table? She didn't answer, but I saw a flicker. Boredom is a kind of hunger. She had it. Look, I said, I don't expect you to be my friend. I expect you to be a professional who has seen enough rollouts to know when the timeline is suspicious. If you want to play this straight, I need a list of the current lien holders. Public record can get me most, but you can save me a week. She looked at my hands. I put them flat on the table. They're steady, I said. She laughed before she could stop herself. 2 days later, Leon called. You owe me tarts and my dry cleaner hates you, he said cheerfully. But good news, I found 4 documents that claim your signature in the last month. 3 are copies of the first sale consent, same notary seal. 1 is a line of credit increase for Harbor Lantern operations. $10,000. Recent draws at a furniture store, a boutique in Portland, and an online ski shop. Owen, I said, my mouth dry. Owen's email linked to the online receipt, Leon confirmed. Your name authorized. Sloppy. You want me to patch the printer they used? Don't touch anything. Let it exist, I said. My voice wanted to climb. I kept it on the floor. I need it as it is. The next morning, I opened the safe deposit box with the key still nestled against my measuring spoons. Inside, next to my mother's locket and a note telling me I could survive without her even if I didn't believe it yet, was a blue folder that said contingency. If I hadn't known my mother, I would have called it paranoia. Knowing her, I called it love with a plan. The folder held a letter from her lawyer from 7 years ago, when she was first sick. It established an automatic board for the lantern if any sale was proposed, without the unanimous consent of the trust's beneficiaries. The board would consist of 3 people whose loyalty has been tested by grease and grief. Rosa, who had been washing dishes the day I broke down on the flour sacks. Mr. Halvorsen, the plumber who never charged us full price. And Tasha, the line cook with the copper ring. The letter said their signatures mattered as much as mine until I turned 30. I laughed a full, ridiculous laugh in the bank's quiet room. Paula put her head through the door, concerned. I showed her the letter. She covered her mouth and began to cry. It is a particular kind of relief to discover the dead believed you would need help, and arranged it. I called the 3 members. Rosa swore. Halvorsen said, knew we'd need my spanner more than once. like we were fixing a pipe. Tasha was quiet for so long I thought the line had broken. I never signed anything, she said finally. I thought, did they use mine too? We met that night in the kitchen after closing. The walk-in hummed its steady, always near freezing tune. The clock over the stove was exactly 5 minutes fast because that's how you keep a brunch line on time. I checked, Leon said, leaning against the door, his laptop glow painting his face. Your names are clean. They forged just Lila's so far. Good, I said. We're going to vote to pause the sale. And we're going to tell Redwood politely that any further action is premature and possibly illegal. And your father? Rosa asked. My father, I said, choosing each word like a knife, thinks he is teaching me pragmatism. He is about to learn precision. We drafted a letter together. We sent it by email. We printed it and hand-delivered it to the little office Redwood was renting, above the gym. I watched Minji read it. She lifted one eyebrow a millimeter. Then she slid it across her boss's desk. Cullen came to see me at the Lantern. He walked like flooring would accommodate him. I think you are reading this emotionally, he said smoothly. These processes are routine. Your father signed with your long-term financial interests in mind. Emotion is what fills the rooms of the things you build, I said. You sell sunsets to people who didn't have them before, and you think that means you made the sun. His smile thinned. I can accelerate the closing, he said. People will be out of your hair faster than you think. My hands were steady on the counter. There is a board you failed to notice, I said. Any movement triggers it. His jaw shifted. A kitchen board? He asked, derision barely leashed. A trust board, I said. But yes, we also have cutting boards that bite back. He laughed, falsely. He left with his coat unbuttoned and the smell of expensive wool making our foyer feel like someone else's house. That night, Evan made pasta and set 2 plates on the small table near the window where the draft finds you even in August. He lit a candle like he always did when he felt his way through hard news. He put his hand out. I did not take it. When were you going to tell me? I asked. Tell you what? His face arranged itself into confusion. It was a face he wore like a tie he didn't like but had chosen anyway. That you were consulting for Redwood. That you brokered the HVAC contract last month. That you were being paid as a project manager if the sale closed. He exhaled. Lila. No, I said softly. The candle made a little sound like someone choking. If you are going to lie, lie fast. I don't have the patience for soft rollouts in my personal life. He stared at his plate. I wanted to get us out from under your dad, he said finally. He treats you like an employee who forgot to clock out. I thought this would give you a way to start somewhere else. I didn't think the timing. You didn't think, I said. You asked me for my signature on routine vendor forms and watched my hand move. You knew I trusted you with numbers because I trusted you with heat. His eyes flinched. Heat is its own language. We both speak it. He knew I knew. I love you, he said, as if he had discovered a new ingredient. I did this for us. Don't use that word as a bandage for a cut you made with a clean knife, I said. Love belongs somewhere else. He slept on the couch. I did not sleep at all. I sat at the kitchen table and planned. You can plan revenge. But the word makes people think of knives and keys down paintwork. There are other kinds. There is the kind that makes a list of institutions that exist to keep contracts real. There is the kind that knows how to tell a story so that the people who would rather keep it quiet understand that quiet is not available. The next morning, I called the Department of Professional Regulation to report the notary irregularities. I filed a complaint with the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division for unauthorized use of a signature. I CC'd Redwood's board and our local paper. I requested that the county schedule a formal hearing on the public benefit of Redwood's tax relief request. Then I sent a calendar invite to my father and Daria. Title, Sunday supper, 6 p.m. My mother's table had seen worse. Daria arrived with a dessert from the fancy bakery and a voice pitched half-an octave above normal. She air-kissed the air near my cheek. My father went straight to the decanter of bourbon, which meant he had been pretending not to drink at home again. We could have done this without lawyers, he said as soon as he sat. That old war song found his teeth. We didn't, I said. You chose the way. Daria touched her pearls. We are all family. Let's not do this like strangers. Family is a verb, I said. It's something you do. You broke it. So now we're doing it this way. My father bristled. I put a roof over your head, he said. I kept that place afloat when your mother... He stopped. He always stops just before he says something he'll regret and then says something else he will regret. You kept yourself comfortable, I said. Mom kept the lantern afloat. If you want to talk numbers, we can talk numbers. I have them. Daria angled a printed brochure onto the table. A rendering of the harbor lantern's future, sleek, white, full of glass. You're holding everyone back, she said, as if announcing a diagnosis. There's a bigger life for you if you let go. Let go is a phrase people use when they want you to drop your claim to what they have already taken. I'm not holding anyone, I said. I am holding two. There is a difference. I slid a printout of the trust clause across the table. Then another, the letter from the board. And then the list of draws Owen had made on the lantern's credit line with my forged authorization. My father didn't read. He took a shallow sip of bourbon and looked at me like I was a child playing at adult. Here's how this goes, I said. You withdraw your attempt to sign on my behalf. You inform Redwood that there will be no sale this quarter. You give me temporary control of operations while we hire an outside administrator. And you apologize. Daria laughed. You're adorable. I am not adorable, I said quietly. I am necessary. My father pointed his glass at me. You always wanted to punish me for moving on, he said. You couldn't stand that I found someone stable. Stable like forged signatures? I asked. Stable like moving money from one account to a card your stepson uses. He flinched. There it was. The thing he didn't want named. I didn't know about the card, he said. It came out like a plea. He looked at Daria in that way people look when they realize they are already falling and might as well find the shape of the ground. Daria's face hardened like sugar overcooked by a second. We needed new furniture for the staging, she said. You always said image sells rooms. My name sold those rooms, I said. My mother's food sold those rooms. Owen's skis don't stage a thing outside a ski hill. When they left, the house felt like it had exhaled something it had been holding too long. For revenge to work the way I wanted, I needed to do something I had been trained not to do. I needed to ask for help loudly. I called a meeting. Staff, neighbors, suppliers. We crammed into the dining room. The chalkboard menu behind me still said chowder. $9, though inflation had told us to lie. I'm going to say this once, and then I'm going to make you a promise, I said. My father and his wife tried to sell the harbor lantern against my mother's trust. They forged my consent. Redwood is pushing a timeline that relies on us not knowing how trusts work. We have two choices. We can stay quiet and hope individual favors keep some of us in jobs. Or we can create a cooperative that can bid for the note and run the lantern. Ourselves. Rosa lifted a hand. We don't have that kind of money. We have credit with people who fed this town when the highway flooded. I said. We have small investors. We have a bank manager who knows how often we paid on time. We have a developer's assistant who has seen how many times her boss lied. I didn't glance at Minji, but I felt her straighten. Tasha looked skeptical. Why would anyone sell us a note instead of a development that promises returns? Because I'm going to make Redwood's returns look like a risk. I said. Investors leave when risk outweighs brand. If their brand becomes lawsuit in a small town where the paper still goes to print, they find another harbor. And because I have a friend who likes weird math, I looked at Leon. He shrugged like he wasn't proud and was very proud. Here's what we did in the next 2 weeks. We formed Bracken Cooperative LLC with a mission statement that used the words heritage and profit in the same sentence without hypocrisy. DP Paul towing Wiesnam to View community being a community bank that the Regel is in distressed notes. The Harbor Lantern's note wasn't distressed yet, but it was nervous. Banks sell nervous notes at a discount to people who will make them quiet. We went public with our ask. We did not whisper. We put jars on counters, sure, but we also wrote op-eds. We asked a podcaster in the next town to interview me. I said the words forged signature and daughter in the same sentence and watched donations multiply. People want to fund justice when it has a face. C scheduled a town hearing on Redwood's tax relief for a Friday evening and made chowder for anyone who came. Bracken's old rules: you feed people, they show up. You tell the truth, they stay. While we worked, Redwood tried to work faster. I got 3 letters on letterheads stamped with speed. The first told me to cease and desist defamation. The second reminded me of the contract's binding nature. The third said something about trespass if I interfered with prospective business advantage. I framed them in the office bathroom so staff could laugh while washing their hands. Day 19 of the clock I had started at the gala. I got an email from a man named Joseph Pike from Pine Coast Community Bank. Subject: note inquiry. He had a bite. We met in his office, where the walls were painted a color that exists to make clients think of stability, and the coffee tasted like something brewed in morning. He asked me questions in numbers. I answered in meals and then translated into numbers. I showed him pre-bookings for December, staff retention rates, and the outlines of the lawsuit we were prepared to file if Redwood persisted. I showed him how many weddings had returned to the Lantern since we brought back the locally famous chocolate cake. I showed him the weird math Leon liked, the cost of bad press times the velocity of a small town conversation. Joseph took off his glasses, the way men do when they want you to think they are thinking. We could buy the note, he said. We could assign it to your cooperative with conditions. You'd have to keep certain ratios, and you'd need to raise a chunk yourselves. We will, I said. I can raise 25% from the community in 60 days, I said. It was ambitious. It was a dare. 45, he said. 30, I countered. He smiled despite himself. 40, done, I said, though my stomach did a thing that felt like a poorly baked soufflé. Minji sent a text 5 minutes after I left Pine Coast. If you want timing leverage, it said. Redwood is planning a groundbreaking announcement at the Founders' Dinner, 2 Fridays from now. She didn't add that that was the day after my mother's memorial date. She didn't have to. I wrote the date in my mother's cookbook in the corner where she had pressed A. Leaf the year after a hurricane took shingles from the Lantern's south face. I whispered to a woman who would not answer, "It's almost time." 2 things happened the week before the Founders' Dinner. 1. Owen tried to move cash from the Lantern tip pool into a new holiday bonus account with his name on it. He left a trail of screenshots on a shared iPad that had my grease smudged, fingerprints all over it. Rosa found it. I copied them and sent them to our lawyer. 2. Evan packed a bag. "I think I should give you space," he said from the doorway. His eyes bruised with sleep he hadn't caught. "Space implies a shape," I said. "This is a sever." He winced. "I'm sorry. So am I said. "But not in the way you hope." He paused. "If I help you take Redwood down, will you?" "No." I held his gaze. "That's not a currency I accept." He nodded. He left the second key on the table we'd chosen together at a yard sale in a summer that felt like someone else's life. On the morning of the Founders' Dinner, I received an email from Pine Coast with the subject "Assignment Executed." The bank had purchased the note. We had 72 hours to finish our community raise and sign the assignment to the cooperative with the conditions Joseph and I had argued into an armistice. I cried quietly in the walk-in. I pressed my cheek to a box of herbs. Then I went outside, where the air was a brightness that felt like being rinsed. The Founders' Dinner is the event where our town's elders wear pins and are new. Money wears certainty. The Harbor Club smells like wood polish and the clink of people who believe in themselves. Redwood had sponsored this year's dinner. The logo on the program made me think of dental floss. Cullen took the stage with his slate suit and his voice that could convince you. A napkin was an equity instrument. He talked about a vision for Bracken's future. He said synergy and activation as if chanting could conjure a better shore. I was not on the program. I was in the room. When he gestured to the screen to show a rendering of a glassed-in restaurant, inspired by the Harbor Lantern, I raised my hand. The MC frowned as if I had broken the choreography. Questions after, he said. I have one now, I said. My voice carried. Years coiling dishwashing hoses had taught it to. People turned. My father was at the redwood table. His hand went to his jaw the way it does when he prepares to look disappointed. In a woman. I'm curious, I said. How Redwood intends to groundbreak on a property whose note you do not control. Cullen's smile held. We have a valid contract, he said. We remain confident. Your contract is contingent on a trust unanimous consent after November 12th. I said. It is November 13th. That consent does not exist. Also, your notary may need a refresher course in ethics. Minji did not smile. But she did adjust her scarf. A ripple ran through the room like a small wave that found a sandbar. I walked down the aisle. My legs did not shake. I climbed the 2 steps to the stage without tripping and took a breath that tasted like my mother's Sunday dinners. I brought a story, I said to the room. It has 3 parts and a moral. I held up 3 fingers. Part 1. My father and his wife attempted to sell the harbor lantern using a forged signature. Part 2. Our staff and neighbors formed a cooperative to buy the lanterns. Note. Today at 9:02 a.m., Pine Coast Community Bank assigned that note to the Bracken Cooperative. Part 3. If Redwood tries to move forward, we will litigate, and we will tell this story in public every day. I plugged a small speaker into my phone. I hit play. The audio filled the room. It was from the planning board meeting 2 weeks prior. The one my father had assumed only 4 people had attended, and no one had recorded. Leon hadn't taught me how to hack. He had taught me how to ask for what is public. The recording caught my father's voice. We'll get Lila to sign. She always gives in when it matters. Darius responded in a whisper that the microphone caught anyway, and if she doesn't, I can sign for her. The room stiffened like a cake pulled too early from the oven. Careful with that, an older man at the front table said. Strong accusation. Strong truth, I said. But don't take my word. Here. I held up the printed notary record with a seal that had wrong edges. We filed a report. The state will investigate. Cullen's jaw ticked.
Bah.
He stepped toward the microphone, then stepped back like a man who has discovered shards in his silk socks. Also, I said, because stories need jokes when they carry knives. If anyone here purchased an $8,000 pair of skis under the Lantern's holiday budget, please see me after. We're raffling them for the tip pool. Laughter broke like a dam that had been waiting to be water again. The MC tried to move the program along. The Redwood logo on the screen behind him looked suddenly cheap. After. The room erupted into that particular kind of talking people do when they are deciding what side to be on. My father didn't come over. He had the look he gets when his first plan has left the road, and he is pretending the ditch is where he meant to arrive. Cullen cornered me near the exit. You've made enemies, he hissed softly, because even his anger dresses well. I've made a record, I said, and a home. He smiled like a paper cut. You can't run a place like the Harbor Lantern on sentiment and soup. You'd be surprised, I said. Soup keeps more people alive than venture capital. The next day, Redwood withdrew their tax relief request. Their press release said the timeline had shifted due to community feedback. Investors made that face people make when they smell something off in the milk, while insisting it is fine. Cullen left town without a groundbreaking ceremony, slipping out between meals like someone who hadn't learned to eat here. The state opened an inquiry into the notary's practice. It turned out she'd notarized signatures for 3 deals she hadn't witnessed. One was ours. One was a condo sale in the next town. One belonged to a man who knew how to smooth those things over. He turned out to be less slick in a courtroom. Evan sent a long email that said the words stupid and ashamed without asking for anything. I did not reply. I printed it and folded it into the blue folder with my mother's letter. I believe in records. My father came to the Lantern on a Tuesday afternoon when the dining room was empty and the bar smelled like lemons because we had just wiped it down. I didn't know she forged it, he said without sitting. You knew you were asking me to give up the shape of my life without the decency of a conversation, I said. You knew you were using a system that thinks daughters make soft signatures. He stared out the window at the gray water like it had a better answer than I had. I thought I was protecting you, he said finally. From the grind. From becoming your mother. I am my mother, I said. The good parts. The part that saves notes and writes contingency plans and feeds people as if. That is the point. The part that asks for help. The part that doesn't forgive theft disguised as love. His eyes went wet. He did not ask for forgiveness outright. He asked around it, the way a person approaches cold water foot by foot. We're filing for removal of you as trustee, I said. It's not personal. He barked a laugh that was all hurt. Of course it is. It is necessary, I said. You can become a person in my life again when you are not a person who can sign. For me. He left with his hands empty. People think revenge will poison you if you drink it. Maybe. But it tasted like clean water to finally stop swallowing things that made my stomach twist. In December, the cooperative signed the assignment. Staff cried. We took a photo in front of the porch wrapped in fir garland. The harbor lantern's old sign gleaming because Rosa had scrubbed it as if it had insulted her. We added a plaque beneath my mother's painting in the dining room, kept by hands. Owen tried to apologize with tickets to a concert. I told him he could return the tickets and donate the refund to the food pantry. He rolled his eyes. He did it anyway. He posted the screenshot on his social media with a caption that made him sound more contrite than he felt. I did not correct him. Some lessons take the long way. Daria sent a legal letter through a new lawyer claiming I had slandered her. Our lawyer sent back the sound file and a polite invitation to sue. She did not. Leon finally got his lemon tarts. He took a bite and teared up not because of sugar but because he liked being part of a thing that held. Minji sent a small plant to the kitchen. I put it by the window where the light is best and named it Persistence because I am not subtle and because plants do not care what you name them as long as you water them. Pine Coast set conditions that made sense. We started a training program for line cooks who wanted to move to management, access to health benefits we had always wanted to offer, and a reserve that meant a broken freezer would be a problem, not a crisis. I learned to read P&Ls without resenting the minutes they took from my Maizen place. Winter came in sharp, then softened. Our rooms filled with people who had loved the lantern in old years and people who were learning how to love it in new ones. I watched fathers at tables with daughters and wondered if those fathers understood the power of their signatures. I watched mothers pass bowls to sons who would not notice their hands until they were gone. On the night of the lantern's New Year's dinner, I lit candles. Not because we are fancy. Because I like the way faces look honest in that kind of light. I carried a cake to table 5, where a woman with hair the color of chestnuts reached for her child. The child reached back. Not because the cake was beautiful, though it was, but because the reaching had been rehearsed for years. I am not naive. There are still bills. There are still roof shingles that think wind is a dare. There are still men like Cullen who will arrive in towns like ours and wave money like a wand at their own reflection. There are still people like my father who will tell themselves they are saving you from a life you would have chosen anyway, if you were given the chance. But there is a record now. There is a cooperative that can sign its own name. There is a plant on the windowsill that grows slow enough to remind me that speed is not the only measure of worth. And there is a story that will always end the same way in my telling. We caught the hand that reached into our pocket. We held up the hand to the light. And we kept the thing we built with steady hands. If you were me, would you invite your father to the lantern's anniversary dinner when spring returns? Or would you let him read about it in the paper like anyone else? I don't know yet. Justice, I am learning, is a dish that requires resting time. For now, when the tide comes in, it sounds like breath. I opened the window in the kitchen and let it in. I called the names of our staff, their actual names. The names on their pay stubs and in their voicemail greetings and on their aprons. They answer. And the harbor lantern answers back. We are here. We kept it. We are keeping it. That is my revenge.